Welcome to the Landmark Theater's Q&A podcast. In this podcast, you will hear a discussion with writer-director Marah Strauch and the world's first female base jumper, Jean Boenish, from the film Sunshine Superman. Moderated by entertainment reporter Kara Werner. Recorded at the Landmark West LA.
My favorite crowd ever.
Yes. How did the story find you, or did you find the story?
Both. My uncle was a base jumper and an aerial cinematographer, Mike Allen. And I had a box of his 16mm films and his VHS tapes. And he actually died in an automobile accident. And I found this footage, and I didn't know any base jumpers. And I went around and I met people, and I met Rick Harrison. And he said, "Oh, you got to meet Jean Boenish." And he told me all about Kara Werner, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds really interesting." So eventually I made my way to Jean.
And how did Miss Jean, how did she convince you to go forth?
I don't think anybody had to convince me. It's like meeting Carl. When you meet the person you know is the right person to do this, then you just fully embrace it.
Warm reception. I love it.
I have to say too, this is for those of you who aren't base jumpers or aren't skydivers here, you have to be told that there are a lot of base jumpers and skydivers here tonight, and a lot of people who knew Carl, and it's really touching because I'm standing on their shoulders, and you may stand on all of our shoulders, because that's why we do this, for the love and our expression of freedom and compassion that is relevant to everything we do in life.
So, with all the hours of footage, and then how did you decide how you wanted to tell the story, and then what techniques to use to do it?
There was a lot of footage, and a lot of it was 16mm reversal film, which is a little bit hard to see. So some of that was kind of rolling through it and kind of discovering what was in the footage, and then also just spending a lot of time talking to Jean and spending a lot of time talking to, other people that were relevant to the story. So it was a lot of time just listening about, what the stuff was about. And then it started to shape itself after a very long time. And it really found its own shape, I think.
Marah herself deserves credit for being an extremely discerning person and knowing what it means to be in tune and working through her life of discovering what it is to be in tune and caring. And you put all three of those together, and she fought for this film, literally fought for this film, not physically, but the way we have to fight in life sometimes.
Yeah.
All right.
It was a war with some of it.
Yet I poured out everything on her because this was a second chance to share what Carl was striving to share through his life and what all of us as base jumpers or skydivers hope to share with the world. And it was a very worthy project, and it still is, and we want to get it out to as many people in the world as possible because this film is not really about base jumping. We can solve so many things. We can solve all of our world's problems very easily, very easily. We just need to do it. And those of us who've done this kind of thing have a very keen perspective of what's important and critical in life. And so many of these things that are shoved up before us that people say, "Oh, that's difficult, that's too hard. Oh, well, this is going to be really hard." They're not. We just have to do it, and we have to do it with compassion. I think Marah's movie just gently presents all of this very well.
Thank you, Jean.
Yes, very good. I wanted to ask you, what was it like for you kind of reuniting with everyone over the course of finding the footage in the story?
The love was palpable, literally. We would meet each other after 30 years or 13 years or however many decades it was. And you could have cut the atmosphere of love in those rooms with a knife. That's where you feel where the real power and strength is.
The question, how did you fund all the filming and the jumping when you were just starting out?
I'm sorry, how did we find
How
it?
did you fund?
How did we fund?
Celia's Norwegian.
Oh, that question. It was a lifestyle. We took everything that we worked on, Carl had started, of course, before I married him. And he worked in a studio that was a room attached to his garage. And he bought a little editing console. He started the small way and stayed small. And he made his films, and then he'd present them to the skydiving community and sell copies of the 16mm films within the skydiving community and take all of the money that he made from that and dump it into making the next film. And beyond that, because we weren't vegetarians at the time, he would say it just keeps us in hamburgers, and it literally was a lifestyle and a labor of love.
The question was, what were your motivations?
Well, this is one reason I'm not jumping now, because I know that I have no reason to be drilling a hole in the air. I don't need to amass numbers. I never needed to prove anything to anybody. But if I needed to, I could, but I would have to get back in shape, get the right equipment, and I'd have to start from square one again, researching each object, and But for the people who don't jump, it's a very serious approach to any activity that you do in life. Any activity. I mean, it's just like looking both ways before you cross the road. I was jumping in. Well, getting current means that you have taken a break in jumping and then you start to jump again. So getting current means that you do have to recheck everything that's going on in your head and everything that's going on with your equipment and make sure it's still in shape to jump to. And I did some skydiving. And the last base jump that I did was when I went to England with a group of friends, and we were jumping off of the chalk cliffs over the beach in southwestern England. It was a lovely trip. And for us, it was like going on a picnic. That's what it was. Yet, I have to say, one of the jumpers did have difficulty then, and I was packing my parachute back away from the cliff's edge, and one of the guys came running back and says, Nigel's had a problem. Can I borrow your binoculars? I gave him my binoculars. He came back and he said, I dropped your binoculars over the cliff. And at this point, I'm thinking to myself, this is odd. Kind of a Keystone Cops. By the way, the man was a policeman who was out with us too. And so he said, I think something's wrong. So I said, well, let me finish packing. I'll close up and I'll jump down and find out. And so I didn't rush. But I quickly finished packing my parachute, and I jumped off, and I could see that he was lying down on the bottom. And I landed, and indeed he had hit. It was a very low cliff, not low by today's base jumper standards, but for us it was something we had to be very careful of. And he had just nicked the cliff with his leg, but you have to be very wary of that kind of thing, and he had broken his leg. So it became a very interesting rescue operation after that, because it was evening by that time, and communication was very difficult. So it was one of those where I ended up scouring the beach looking for parts to splint his leg, and found an old crab pot and some old things that had washed up and splinted his leg, and then laid down beside him to keep him warm, and sent some passerbys up to start the communication process. And then after dark, there's this big flare like in World War II, and the sky was lit up, and there's this boat coming in from offshore, from the ocean, because that's the only way they could access the beach. So yet, it was part of the day for us. It was part of the way we had prepared. We knew what we would do. We knew what to do, and we cared to do the right thing. And everybody did the right thing, and it turned out wonderfully. And for days afterwards, the guys in London would say, "Who is that amazing American girl?" Which made me feel kind of good. Yeah. I think the hardest part of that was driving the old MG back to London on the left side of the road in traffic.
Wow. Well, you mentioned preparation. I interject real quick. I was just wondering how, for you in Norway, can you talk a little bit about how many times you were there? Because she did this over 8 years. I don't know if you guys know that.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Norway for 3 different summers. Hallgrim. One of the first times I was researching Norway, I had lunch with him, and he gave me a book about Norway, and I was like, okay, I was really excited, but it was really cool. We had to shoot at the Troll Wall, which was incredibly difficult to shoot there, but rewarding. But we had, you'd have to find weather windows, much the same as when Jean and Carl were there. So there was a lot of preparation. We had aerial cinematographer Peter Dagerfeld, who's also a skydiver and base jumper, and we did a lot of drawings, and Vashku helped me come up with a lot of amazing ideas, and it was really cool. So it was hard work, and I think it paid off. But we did it over 3 summers, so it was a challenge.
Yeah.
I know that you restored and went through a lot of footage to make this movie, and I'm sure there's lots that got left on the editing room floor. Is there any plans to release any of that footage anywhere?
No, I mean, yes. I think, yes. Won't we put things out that
Carl's
we created?
films, his finished films, which are very good. There's a feature-length film called Playground in the Sky. It was digitized by Marah, and then she also digitized his 4 film poems, which are 15-minute films, pre-music videos, because they had no narration, but they had custom music put to them that was written specially for them. So those 5 digitized pieces, plus a couple little extras, will come out. They are done as part of this project.
And I mean, we transferred a lot of footage, so there's also this footage that exists in this digital form, which is just so good, I think.
And there's, in all of this that you saw here, I've seen this film maybe almost a half a dozen times now, and every time I see it, it's totally different for me, which is really neat. I just am looking forward to seeing how this ends. But I know that there is a very interesting backstory for each one of these tiny segments in the film. And I keep saying, oh, Marah should do another
Part 2.
For her first time out, she kind of knocked it out of the park.
Jean, do you plan on jumping again?
No, I don't think so.
That's fine.
There are a lot of things in life that are considerations, and I think I can safely say no. If a building were on fire and I had my parachute, I would definitely jump off.
Excellent.
That's a good one.
No, well, seriously, I mean, we had presented to building owners decades ago, the possibilities. And I am very serious when I say many of the people in this room are pioneers in things that offer humanity a great deal. And not only about being humane, but technically offering. And many of those ideas also are offhandedly rejected. I myself had introduced to a parachute manufacturer in an elevator at one of the meets that we were at decades ago, the concept of, I said, I really, really have this dream of a ram air jumpsuit. That's what I called it. And I think you saw what it became from the last, but he laughed at me. He laughed, and he said, never happened. Bumblebees can't fly.
How'd you get all the music together?
Well, I basically made like a wish list, and I spent a lot of time, just making like playlists that I really wanted in the film, which everybody, tells you not to do because they're like, you're gonna get attached to that music and you can never ever have it. And lots of people were like, you can't have this music, you really can't. One of the things I learned from making the film was that limitations are sometimes just artificial. So.
Ask and he shall receive.
And so Eric, my amazing producer who's not here, who's in New York tonight, Eric Brueggemann, he is a magician. Like this guy, I said, I want these tracks. This is what I want. And like everybody was like, you're not going to get them. And we showed people parts of the film that their music would be played in. And everybody, after a lot of negotiation and charming them, and Eric's very charming, he's like the most charming, and he's able to have conversations that were really able to make people feel like this was a good thing to be a part of. And he just really approached people on a very human basis and was able to actually get one band, and then he was able to get like all the rest of the music. And I'll also be downstairs afterwards, but it was a long and grueling process that ended with almost every track I wanted except for Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Which, if you know them, I'm still kind of angry.
Maybe on your next one.
Yeah.
You can let them up on your next one.
Did I ever get a chance to jump with wingsuit? I got a couple of long skirts that were salmon colored, and I cut slits in them so I could put my webbing through. And I went out to the drop zone with these two skirts and jumped out of the airplane, and all the guys were just loving it because I'd jump out, skirt would fly up, they'd be watching from the airplane, I'd have to go into a dive, pull my skirt back down, and then fly along, and I'd land, and I'd say to these guys, you've got to do this. This is the neatest thing. You get so much lift between your legs. I said, this is fantastic. That's the closest I ever got to these wingsuits. Yeah.
But and then Rudy came in. He put a wingsuit on you during the filming, and you looked cool.
The fellow who was doubling for Carl, who's quite a bit taller than me, he said, "You want to try my wingsuit on?" I said, "Yeah." He took a picture. I look like a mouse inside this thing. It's huge. But
awesome.
It would be lovely. But I think my time has passed because I recognize that it takes extra strength, and I did ask one of the wingsuit jumpers when I was just out at the drop zone delivering some posters for the film. I said, does it still require a great deal of strenuous strength to do this? And he said, not as much as before because of the design of the wingsuits. They're changing. So, but you have to be extra careful. There are different things for every type of jumping that are unique to that type of jumping, and so they do require a great deal of attention. And we do, I'm sure, everybody who's serious about it pays the attention, and that's why we get to enjoy it, because we've already taken care of the 99% of the preparation part. So that 1% that's left is mostly getting off a good launch and then following your plan.
I'm a non-jumper. I was curious, what's your life been like for the past 30 years? Your profession and other things.
Well, Marah prepared me. She said, they're going to ask this question.
They always do.
I organized base jumping from off of the New River Gorge Bridge for about 10 years, and I amassed an enormous amount of leadership knowledge from that. And I had wonderful volunteer staff. Jumpers came from around the world to serve other jumpers. And we made it so that it was wonderful for the public who was there as well, because it was a very important public event. And we were very conscious of that. So safety and enjoyment for everyone. And then about 10 years of various kinds of education, because I was dealing mostly with adults in the educational format or forum with the jumpers. And I've taught all the way down to 4-year-olds, and a very interesting thing is that teaching adults is just like teaching 4-year-olds, and teaching 4-year-olds is just like teaching adults. I do it differently, as you can imagine. It is a little in advance of what the industry is ready for. However, the parents and the students loved it, and they walked away with an enormous appreciation for science. And I am trying to do what I can now with the knowledge and experience that I have to offer whatever else is left that I can offer the rest of the world before I'm gone. And I'm doing what I can in my politics. And I wonder sometimes if I should go into a higher level of that, because we have such needs, and these decisions are pretty clear that need to be made, but they're just not being made. And I think it's up to all of us. So I'm trying to do, and in the last 10 years, it's been with Marah, and concentrating on this, because I think this film is a huge way to offer sharing and open dialogues worldwide. It's so gently presenting so many different themes. And so I'm fully in support of the work that I need to do to support her film, and I hope that everybody else will spread the word as well. And then whatever comes as far as somebody being receptive to what I can offer, I will do that.
Question is, how do you feel about kind of how the sport has changed from when you were there and now, and what do you think about base jumping now?
Okay. The young man asked about starting when it was underground. When we started, it was never underground. Our objective was to share everything and share it freely and openly. And the hump that we had to get over was helping people understand that this was possible to do. And so for that reason, and you can call it a rationalization if you want, that's fine. But for that reason, we didn't ask before we were doing certain things. Yet you can see also that we had the very first fully authorized building jump for the Memphis Cotton Carnival. And the reason that worked was because there was 100% enthusiasm, not 99.9 with one vocal naysayer, 100% enthusiasm by all of the people who owned the building, who were running the carnival, and who were doing the jumping and the filming. And that's what it takes. And if there is a naysayer, you've got to get the negativity handled and out of the midst and just out of there in order to succeed. So we were very fortunate to, well, it's not just fortune, it's knowledge. It's knowledge and experience to know that when things are right and when they're the right people, and we sift through, as Carl would say, we separate the wheat from the chaff. He did that in editing, and he had high standards. And it's about also communicating what these standards are, so that everybody understands the goals. And if everybody has, if we each live up to our own high standards, then everything else, the product is wonderful. We don't have to worry about what somebody else thinks, just live up to your own highest standards.
So what do you think about how it's changed then?
Unfortunately, well, this is another one of the whole backstories. There has been a disconnect between the younger generations, because we're well more than 2 or 3 generations since Carl and I were starting this, and so they have had to do some reinventing the wheel, but also I hear things, there's a lot of rewriting history that has gone on too. And I am probably more sensitive than anybody to what comes out in the press or what another jumper says that I know is not true. But you do have to very carefully balance the grace that needs to be expressed and what things you need to let go versus what things do need to be talked about. Like since this past weekend, there's a great deal that needs to be talked about. And one of the big things is that all of the press, just by repeating that something is illegal, makes people think that's the case. It's not. It's a great deal more like the NSA debacle. If you knew the backstory, then you would know that better investigative journalism needs to be done about a lot of things, and questions need to be asked, and that just because it's coming from a source doesn't mean that it's particularly true. That problem in Yosemite can be very easily solved.
Thank you guys
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for
so
coming.
much.